Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're at the bottom of page 1362. I began now the second interpretation, and we say the Sira, the moon, Malchus, Lesla Megama Klum, has nothing of its own. And the first interpretation was that it receives from Zoh. All it has, it receives from higher, and we elaborated upon that in the last few pages. That even when Malchus is built up, it still is essentially channeling the energy of Zoh into Biyah. Now, the second interpretation, which is Gamze Emes, is also true, is that it receives from below. That what Malchus has, it receives from below. So even though Malchus does sustain and energize existence, but it's less Megama Klum, it's not from itself, it's coming from what it receives from the Allah's Man, the Mayim Nukvim, the Aveda of our Aveda from below. And to understand this, the Rebbe Rashab began elaborating the difference between Midas HaMalchus is Muvdelas, is separate from a different than all the other Midas. That in the fact that it needs another to stimulate it, to get it go, you need, because do another. Okay, we're going to get back to that, but to understand, he started explaining that Midas, Chesed, and Gvura, and in general, human emotions, or emotions in general, they are faculties that do not require, that they also exist. It's a Shaya Gam B'lei Zulas. They're also possible without another. You don't need another entity or another person to have these faculties. And he's explaining it several ways. Reishis, the first thing which we learned yesterday, is because in the way they come into being, in the way they're formed, these faculties, Reishis b'tchilas hamshachos ma'nefesh, they're hamshacha from the nefesh. The soul, the spirit of a person has in it faculties, has the capacity for these faculties. And they don't need something else outside of them to shape them, just like we're born with eyes and ears and the faculties of the power of vision and the power of hearing. We have the power of love and the power of discipline, chesed and gvura. So it's true, it's hamshacha and alemis initially, because first it's there, it's hamshacha manefesh, but it's not revealed yet, but it's there. And he went further, he said, for example, when you talk about a person who is by nature a good person, teiv be'etzem, he's capable of being stimulated at any given moment to do chesed. So that means because he already has a flow coming out of his nefesh, hamshacha teiv min hanefesh, of goodness. That's his wiring. So everybody has chesed within the nefesh, mitzat shleimus hanefesh. But the person who has especially particular a good strain, so to speak, a kind streak, as we call it, a kind person, that's because so this is not dependent on anyone else. We're talking about just the natural flow of chesed, but this person was uniquely wired in this way. And the same thing with Isha Gvura. That this Amshach is there more than it is with another person, because that's how he is. So you see from this that it's not just a potential state. It's an actual personality type that exists and doesn't need anyone else for it to exist. And in this context, from this perspective, midas amizdamim elamech, the midas of a person, the emotional personality, the emotional faculties of someone are similar to the mind, in the sense that it does not need another. A chacham be'etzem means that his mind is simply created with a unique power, and that's why he's capable of conceiving and understanding every idea. So yes, he's not actually doing it until he's actually involved in studying and learning. That's why he needs to have yisasik b'meskolis. Without that, lo yeh chacham b'poil. But the bottom line is, it's there already within the person. He has that, the brain power, so to speak. The same thing with chesed power. So what's the difference between midas and moichin? The difference is moichin, for it to come out in actuality, there you don't need anybody. You can just sit and study and learn on your own. For chesed to come out, for midas to be expressed, there you need someone to bestow your chesed too. But the very midah of chesed, the very faculty in that is similar to the mind. So it's different in their expression. One needs another, one doesn't need another. But for their actual faculty, the midas also don't need a zulas, another. Ubemidas ef shaliyas hashpah bepel beloy azulas. Avlam shalmet sadanefesh bemidas kamei b'mechin. But as far as how it transmits and how it extends from the soul, the midas are similar to the meichin. It's only how they express themselves to another is the difference. That's what we stopped. So that's where we stopped. And now he's going to say that's reshis. He called that reshis. First of all, that's one way we understand how midas don't need another for their very being. Now he's going to say ulavadjais. So we're reading now 4 lines from the bottom of page 1362. I'm going to continue reading. And the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. So what does he say? He says, ulavadjais, and beyond this, or besides this, or in addition to this, there's another point to be made in explaining why midas do not need another to be created. Again, we're not talking about they need another to be expressed, but not to be created. Haregam hiseidas hamida yochel is gam kem b'lei hazulas. Going further, even the awakening of the midah, the arousal, the stimulation of the midah, also is possible without another person. So he's now splitting and breaking it even further, more subtly. Till now, he said that the very faculty is similar to the mind. That's how you're wired. But in actual expression, you need someone to give kindness to. The fact that you have kindness is intact, and that's why you're capable, like he said, you're yochel. He's capable of giving kindness anytime, especially someone who's wired that way. But the bottom line, you need someone to be kind too. You can't be kind to yourself. That's not chesed. So he's going further and saying, even the Sederis is also you can have without a zulas. The Isha Teiv, because this naturally good person that we've been talking about, this naturally kind person, he is stimulated and awakened and aroused and desires to do good with his chesed. In other words, he has chesed within him. He has that natural kindness more than another person would have, part of the hamshachah that comes out of his soul in that seamless and beautiful, kind way. So he has a seidus, which means he's actually aware and conscious, and a desire to do good. Even if he has no one around him, if there's no one there in order whom to bestow his goodness or kindness, or who to mashpia to transmit, to give to, that still does not stop him from being able to be awakened and stimulated and have a very strong desire and a desire to do kindness. And he actually has pain from the fact. So it's not passive. It's not just saying, oh, you know what, we have the potential faculty in our soul to be kind. No, we actually have a conscious feeling and a desire to give, and actually has pain. He agonizes and feels bad that he doesn't have someone to give this kindness to. You know, I've heard people, We're not talking about necessarily the highest level people. I've heard some of you, I've heard people who push it when they have such a desire to give tzedakah, when they don't have someone to give tzedakah to, they simply they're in agony. They feel inadequate. They feel something's missing. Like we find by Avram Avinu, they had great pain. Next page. Top of 1363. He was mitzvayed. He agonized. He was in pain over the fact that he didn't have anyone, that he didn't have someone to mashpia his chesed. So we see here, it's not just a dormant faculty. It's not even just hamshachim and nefesh, where there's a faculty at work, like you have the power to see. It's just part of who you are. But here, there's an actual feeling involved. You're actually feeling chesed coming from you. You want to give the chesed, you desire to do it. You're already awakened to do so, you're stimulated, and you actually have pain when you can't do it, because you have no one to give it to. So that clear proof, it clearly indicates that there's a seirus chesed, not just amshachas chesed, not just a koyach chesed. It's not just the faculty. It's not just even the hamshach as in the faculty being a tangible faculty, but there's actually the faculty is actually aware, awakened, stimulated. So therefore you see from this that the midas, except Malchus, of course, which we're going to read now, have, even without another, they exist, and they actually could be awakened without anyone there. In other words, you could have a situation where you are, let's say, in a neutral state. You see someone comes over to you and says, I need help. And it awakens in you the desire, the chesed within your nefesh, and you extend help to them. That, you say, came from another. But it doesn't have to be that way. With a midah, it's not the only way it could happen. It could also be that you, being a isha chesed, and you have chesed in your nefesh, so you are stimulated to give, to be kind. And you'll actually look for someone to help. Not just wait. I'm just putting it in context. It doesn't mean it can't come from another, but it doesn't require another. That's the point here. Mashenkin midas hamalucha. Now he's going back to the beginning of the midah of Malchus, Malucha, kingship, leadership, or kingship, or sovereignty, however you translate it, Beisnasus, and exaltedness, or you could also say sovereignty. Here, it does not happen on its own. It's only through another. The Hagam, the midas Beisnasus, Yeshna ba'odam be'etzem, ba'asher hu odam. The question I asked yesterday, which is an obvious question. We're born a human being, Basheru Adam, just because by merit of his very being a human being, Yeshna ba'odam be'etzem. He has fundamentally a sense of exaltedness, certain specialness, a quality where we feel kingly, we feel unique. I'm not talking about now if somebody beats up a person and they feel very lowly about themselves, but there's a natural element in a human being of isnasus. A certain element, I'm not talking about arrogance or superiority, just a sense of value. Self-esteem would be maybe the right word. That's natural. That you have by birth. Like he says, be'etzem, basheru adam. As a matter of fact, let's just go back. He said this on page 1361. I just want to read it inside because there he also said it. The very fact that we're created that way, we're created with a special quality because we have a neshama, a certain sense of value. But there he said, but there it's behelim, b'li pashtus klal. That which is intrinsic or inherent within us is concealed. I'm reading on page 1361. So that's a snasas betzim. So he's saying, so even though that's the case, and I should say, actually, let me just see something. I think back on page 1214 rather, he also said it. I just want to see that. I just want to see the language similarities. Teva Mamshola, yeah. He actually said in the bottom of page 1214, he said, this is the nature of a person, and this nature is not found by animals. Shezeh mitzad mailas nafshe be'etzem. That's the quality of a soul on its own, but on fundamental quality. Okay, just comparing it. Okay, so this is a qualification. You just said Midas Maluch is not possible without another, but 1 second, we're all born by very virtue of being a human being. You have a certain sense of value, of exaltedness, of Malucha. So he's not going to answer this till after the parentheses. So let's read the parentheses, but just bear in mind he's now qualifying. But Kol Mokum, he's going to say afterwards that it's fundamentally in a state of Tachlis Ahelam. It's completely concealed. Chesed, you can feel chesed in your heart. You can feel you want to give, and you may even have pain that you can't give. In Malchus, he's going to say that we're wired that way, but there's no revealed expression of it in any sense until there's another. We'll have to analyze what that means. But let me read the parentheses where he elaborates a little more about what is this midas hamelucha be'etzem within ba'adam. V'yashlemer, he says, shezeo mashakosov milu v'kivshua uredu v'dgas hayam. Okay. So this is a pasuk in Bereshis, where it says, after Hashem creates, after God created Adam and Chava, so then he gave them the bracha, he said, Pru urevu, be fruitful and multiply. Umilu sa'aretz v'kivshua. You'll fill the world and you will conquer it. Uredu, you'll have dominance over all the creatures on earth and the fish in the water and so on. So actually this expression he already brought, that's why I wanted to look it up. On the bottom of page 1214, he also brought this. He said, just to read inside, 1 second. But there he didn't say yesh lemer. Now he's saying yesh lemer. He says this element of malucha that we are all wired, and it's intrinsic with us, a certain element of kingship, leadership, if you wish. He says that's what the pasuk is saying. It doesn't say that by any other creature. It doesn't say that an elephant or a lion, even though they're very powerful creatures, that they will have that ability to conquer the world. As a matter of fact, even though they're far stronger than we are, we have that capacity. So who's the Melech HaElam really? No, who has the power to conquer? Look what we've done. And I'm not talking about arrogance, not necessarily. We're not talking about someone who abuses that power. The very fact that we have that capacity. Uksiv, timshalu b'maisi yadecha. That you will dominate. Timshlo means to rule, to govern. B'maisi yadecha. I think it's referring to the Eibishter that is creating beings that will be conquered. They'll be rulers, governors. Shanitan le'koyach hamemshala, which means the human being was given the power to rule, the power to govern. Not just, obviously there are people who are actual kings who have the power to govern other people as well. But the very human being has a koyach hamemshala. So Rebbe Rashab is somewhat analyzing this inherent power of Malucha within us. Ve'efsher, the Rebbe Rashab says the word ve'efsher, and perhaps, he's not saying it definitively, he's saying perhaps that this is connected to the power of free will that was given to the human being. That's an interesting piece here. So that we have the power to create technologies and the power to tame the elements and the power to control the world we're talking in a positive way. That's again, we see that. Our intelligence, our capacities, we have such power. We have the koyach hamemshala. But he's now saying that perhaps it's also connected to will, the power of bchira, which means that we're not victims of consequences. We're not victims of nature. The koyach hamemshala lishlet ala teva. That even though you have a temptation or desire to do something, You have choice not to act on it. Free will. So the Rebbe Rashab says that perhaps that's also a part of the koyach hamemshola. So it's not just you have the power to dominate, to conquer, to govern and control. Even the power to lishlet ala teva, ubederech klal, and in general, that's the idea of moyach, hu inyan moyach shalit ala lev. Like he explains in Tanya, chapter 12, that the mind, shalit. Shalit is the word you use for a king. It governs, it rules. Koyach hashlita. It rules over the heart. So even though it doesn't bring it, but perhaps it's like Ezu Gibber, Hakovish Esitzre. We have the power to control to conquer. But the point here is asking Efshe that's also included in the Melucha within us. So it's a certain element of, I would even add the word dignity. You have the ability, you're not a victim. Even though you may have temptations and you may have desires and you may have all kinds of things, you have the power of self-control. And he's connecting that to Bchira. He says the word Bchira, Koyach Bchira. I don't know if he's talking about free will right now, we always talk about process, pure free will, but he means that we have the ability, the capacity to control things. An animal doesn't have Koyach Bchira. When an animal is hungry, it needs to go hunt and it will go hunt. You can't stop it. A human being, you can ask a human being to fast on Yom Kippur. You can't ask an animal to fast on Yom Kippur. In other words, we can control and harness and channel our very natural desires as well. So all of this parenthesis coming to explain the midas ha'isnasus yeshna ba'odam be'etzem ba'asheru odam. What makes a person being a unique individual? So if that's the case, so why did you say that it doesn't exist without another? We have it naturally within us. But kol mokem, nevertheless, hu betachlis ha'helem benafshe. It's utterly concealed within the nefesh. There's no expression of it. And it's not like a faculty that's already, like we spoke before about chesed, that it's an existing faculty from the nefesh. Also not even a concealed hamshach. Like we said before, a person could have a powerful brain power, even if they're not actualizing it, but they have brain power. They have a powerful mind. Or a midas hachesed, that's a powerful kindness within them. But that's hamshacha nelemes. Here, it's not hamshacha nefesh, not even a concealed one. It's just it's an inherent aspect to human nature that we have the quality of leadership and governance. But there's no hamshacha. It's interesting, he says, kol kach. Not just gamle b'chinas hamshacha nelemes, gamle b'chinas hamshacha nelemes kol kach. So what does he mean by kol kach? Not so concealed. Is he referring to like chesed and that? Probably. Here in the parentheses, he qualifies. He explains why. He says it's not namshach and alemes kol kach. The EF Shalemer, he says, in the parentheses, you cannot say she'em b'chin hamshacha klal. You can't say there's no hamshacha at all. Ma nefesh, from the nefesh. Aval ein b'chin hamshacha b'chin moked al agili. But it's not a hamshacha that you can identify and say this is the beginning, the source of the gili. When it comes to chesed, so without a zulas, you don't have who to bestow kindness to. But you feel completely, like he said, you can feel completely, I want to be kind, and I'm driven to be kind, I have a desire. I even have pain that I don't have someone to give. That's hamshacha. So the hamshacha from the nefesh is a mocker for the gili. So then when someone comes around and you can give them chesed, it's not a big leap. When it comes to Melucha, he's saying, to say there's no hamshacha at all, you can't say. There's something there. But to say that it relates to, and it's just a step away, like in other words, you have a very strong desire to govern and to lead, and all you need is someone to come and say, hey, here I am. I'll be your subject. I'll be your nation. Say, no, in Melucha, it's there in the nefesh. But it's not hamshacha, Not even Nalem is called Kach. That's why it's called Kach. There is something there. Concede, but it's not enough to call it the beginning of the process of Melucha. It's too much still in a dormant state or in a more inherent state than the midah of Chesed. So, but he is clearly saying there is Hamshacha here. Can't say there's no Hamshacha, but it's not Hamshacha M'chinas Moker Lagili. With Chesed, it's a clear relationship and they're much closer to each other. Now, you still could ask, what does that mean? We do see people who have a leadership quality, and they do feel a need to be a leader. Again, I'm not talking now arrogant, not arrogant. That's not the point. They do have a sense. So why is it different than Chesed? So let's see what he continues saying to see the distinction. I don't want to jump the gun. Let's see how he explains this further. And then I'm going to stop at some point to hear questions, but I think we're still middle. Let's just see how he develops this. He says, "Ulechein be'emes," and for this reason, and therefore, in truth, in order to stimulate the midah of leadership and exaltedness and sovereignty and governance, who bekevid yeser miseres shari midas. It's much harder to stimulate that midah in a person than it is the other midas, the other emotions like chesed, gvura, so on. Like we see in Kabbalah's Malchus, when a person is being accepting, being coronated or being appointed a king, that in order to get the melech to want to be melech, be the king, the nation has to demonstrate with an increased bittul, with an increased sublimation, a increased nullification of themselves, Ela Melech, to the king, Shem is Batli Melov, B'chol Retzeno. That they make it clear to him that we are completely subjugated with our entire will. It's not partial. It's not like, maybe yeah, maybe not. There's no ambiguity. It's B'chol Retzenom Legamri, that they show we are completely dedicated. By Dezed Dafke Meserer Boikoyach HaMelucha VaMshola. It's only that level of commitment that Dafke will be the cause to awaken in him the desire, the power, the faculty of Koyach HaMshola Melucha, which is in him. Like we said, it's inherent in every person. But you need a lot more power, you need a lot more effort to draw that out than it is with other midas. If a person's a kind person, you don't need that effort. You don't need someone to say, I'm completely committed to you. Whatever you say, your will is my command. All a person with chesed has chesed is already, the chesed is there, like we said, it's a mocker to the gili. You just need someone to give it to. And it could be completely, you have it all coming from you, and all you need is a keli. With melucha, no, the other way around. Even if it's inside the person, and it is, it's in a state that needs a lot of work of the Am to say, we will be completely committed to you. Now, you could argue the reason for that is because the king says, I can't be a king unless they're completely committed. But apparently from Pshat here, it looks like because the midah is a different type of midah. It's not an expressive one on its own. It's very much bound by that connection to the people. In other words, ein melech b'lo yam. A king is really not a king without a nation. When the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1950, 51, so we know how much he resisted. And the Chassidim wrote a Ksavis Kashrus. It's called writing like a contract almost, where they signed and saying we're committed to the Rebbe. Now, it's not just because he needs that, because then he can be effective because he doesn't have people who are willing to listen to him. But a way to really get that melucha active, you're far more bound, because without a nation, fine, the person has leadership quality. But what does it value? Chesed has value because you're just a good person. It's true. Without a person to give the chesed to, it's also somewhat more hypothetical potential. But you could see the chesed, you could find the tzad. Here, he's essentially saying that a king will not be in pain if no one comes to him and says, we want you to be our king. He doesn't say this explicitly, but it apparently means it's inside him, but it's more apart. And you need the people to really get it going. The person should actually say, okay, I accept, I will be a king. Now, it's clear also that we're not talking about people who want to be politicians or leaders or presidents, and they're driven for their own ego. Clearly, we're talking about a pure king, a true king, not someone who just wants to be powerful. There are people who are very itching to be leaders, and they work very hard to become leaders, and they don't need to wait for people to come and tell them, hey, we want you to be our leader. They actually will manipulate their way and maneuver to become leaders. He clearly is not talking about that here. Just want to qualify. Here he's talking about a true melech who is really a humble person, may have that quality within him, and does have that quality, but you really need an am to get it going. And that's what he's saying here about Malchus in contrast to the Sharia Midas. Mashe'ena came b'Sharia Keiches. I'm going to read a few more lines. Actually, maybe we should read all the way because I see there's a lot more here. Yeah, let's read on, and then we'll stop for the questions or discussion. So okay, so mizbatlin el b'kol tzeinim legamri v'aydei dafke v'sei le'boykei hamelucha v'amshala. Good. Mashe'ene came. By contrast, this is not the way it is b'shari hakeches in the other faculties. K'moy b'ashpos ha'seichel. Like, for example, in the transmission and conveying of ideas, of seichel, of intellect. Shegam came by the bitla makabel. There you also have to have the bitla makabel. A teacher requires that the student is receptive. If they're not receptive and there isn't some bitl, it's not very conducive for hashpos ha'seichel. Shereitze b'hashpa, that the student, the recipient, has to want the hashpa. Imagine a teacher is ready to teach, and the student is not there, or they're distracted, they're not even listening. So you also need the bitl. However, ain't a klal be'efen bitl kazeh k'moy b'seres midas hamalucha. Yet, it's not at all the same type of subjugation or receptivity as it is when you need to be ma'ored and awaken the midah of malucha. Yeah, and you see that for sure. You don't need a student to say to the teacher, hey, I am completely yours, and whatever you say I'm going to do, and there's complete, you're the king, I'm the subject. You need bittul that the student is receptive. Klei reikon, he's listening, ready to absorb. He has a bittul and respect for the teacher. But respect for a teacher is a far cry. It's not the same thing as Emes HaMelech, that is between a nation and a king. And the reason for that is because the bid of melucha, or the power of melucha, there you need to awaken something in a much inner more place that's far more, what I said, dormant, or I'm not sure the exact words to use, but it's not stimulated yet. Because it's not that much transmitted. There's some amshacha. There's something there. But even but concealed, it's not like the chesed we talked about, or intelligence where there's already chachma there, and the chacham wants to teach, or the Baal chesed wants to be kind. By Malchus, you need to dig deeper, because Malucha doesn't have the expressiveness. Remember, Les Lamergam Al Klum is the whole idea. Malucha doesn't have that form of expression. Umakolshkein. Shalo yesh gili midas hamalucha. So not only is Amshach, for sure there's no Gili Hamalucha. There's not even Amshach Kol Kach, like he says, even concealed. For sure there's no revelation of Amidah Malucha like there is, let's say, when a person wants to be kind. Afilu La'atzmei, even to himself. The Ish Chesed, he feels kindness. He feels that he wants to be kind, and he actually has pain when he can't give it. So he's aware of it. Here, There's no gili at all. And not to yourself, not even to himself. Like the midah, like the faculty of kindness, that even without another, it's in a revealed way that you're aware of it yourself, you're conscious about it. Whereas midas hamalucha, the midah of leadership, is not revealed at all without another. And it gets stimulated, awakened, and revealed dafke through another. Whereas chesed does not need another to get stimulated. It needs another to receive and to be able to fulfill your desire. Whereas here, the stimulation itself is only through azulas. I'm going to read till the end of the paragraph. Might as well just cover the whole subject. And then, so if you have any questions, please wait another few minutes. Another point, he's going to make now another point, v'gam, and additionally, the chesed v'gvura yochel liyas lo yal nefrodim dafke. Another distinction. Chesed v'gvura, the midah of kindness and discipline or restraint, is possible also on something that is not separate from you. Nefrodim means, as he's going to say, strangers. You could do chesed and gvura, the gamal bonim shaykh in midas the chesed and gvura. Even on your own children, you could be midas of chesed and gvura are completely applicable to people who are close to you, to people who are extension of you, people who are related to you. Mashenk midas hamalucha, however, the faculty of kingship, leadership, va'isnasus, and exaltedness or sovereignty, ein shaykh al abonim. It's not possible over your children. We're not again talking about parents who think they're kings or queens. We're talking about a healthy situation. It's not shaykhul. V'gam lo yal oyavim. And also not on beloved ones. Ukahai gavna, and similar. Rak al avodim v'nefrodim dafke. Only on servants and people who are outside of you. So if your family comes to you and says, hey, we want to coronate you as king, that's not called Malchus. Or people who love you. Because there the relationship is a father and a child, a husband and wife, relatives, friends, colleagues. Malucha is actual power of authority. So though a parent has authority, but it's not the authority of a king or queen. So he says, now what's that connected to our discussion? So he says, V'hainu gam kemetamanal. This is also due to the same reason we've been discussing till now. Why is that the case? Mishum de midas chesed gvura yechelim liyes bizgalas shalei idei azulas. Being that chesed gvura are actually faculties within you. It's not about the other. The other is only, so to speak, the way you express it and actualize it. So that's why it's possible to have chesed and gvura even without another. Since it's not dependent on another, it's about you. So why can't? So the chesed gvura could also be on those that are not strangers and not servants, on your own family, on your own children, on people close to you, because it's more of an expression of your ched, just like your seichel that you're teaching. You don't need to only teach to people who are complete strangers. You can teach your own children. You can teach your spouse. You can learn with people that you love and they love you, because it's your faculties being expressed to another. In Moichin, we said you don't need another altogether. You can learn on your own. In Midas, you need another at least to express it to. But the Midah itself, like we learned, is completely intact. And not only that, you feel it. So therefore, it doesn't necessarily have to be on Nifrodim. Even your own child, you can express your kindness to. Mashenk and Inina Malucha, by contrast, Malucha, on the other hand, kingship, leadership, EF Shali is Belay Hazulas. There, it doesn't have any manifestation in any way without another. That's why it's dafka on Nefrodim. Let's explain what that means. Because you need something very powerful to draw it out of you. With chesed, you don't need anything powerful to draw. You just need someone to give you chesed to. Because it's more about you, the mashpia, than about the makabel. In Melucha, it's not about you at all. The whole thing is only because another will elicit that Melucha. And that is dafka nifradim. Something close to you will not have that power to draw from that deeper place. It needs more explanation, because why can't you say, based on this, that if children really dig deep, they can draw the Melucha in you? First of all, it doesn't really resonate. But I'm trying to understand why nifradim, because I'm feeling because nifradim are like so if outside people who don't know who you are, and they're not your friends, and they're not your colleagues, and they're not your children, why would they want you to be a leader? So that touches you in a place and says, it draws out of you something that would not exist without the zulas. That's how it sounds like he's saying. We can elaborate more, but I want to stop here. Firstly, I read a lot without stopping. And let's see if questions, comments.
Yeah, I have a question.
And then we could analyze this further. But I just did want to point out that it needs a little more explanation in front of them. I think that's the reason. I think it's something like, let me just say one more thing. It's like to draw sparks out of a flintstone is very different than drawing flames out of a hot coal. Hot coal, the flame is there. All you got to do is fan it. So you need to fan it. The sparks in the flintstone are not there in any mitzias. So the only way is by striking it with a lot of pressure. So that could be the difference in a way, just as an example. Now, when it's talking about beloved ones, you have chesed in you. But you need to fan it. So you have people, you give the chesed, it could be friends, it could be family, and so on, children. But in order to draw out melucha, which is far more like a very much more within, you need something really powerful to draw from there. And that's dafka nifradim, because people who have no reason, they're not your children, and yet they feel that need to have you as a leader, that has that power. I think that's part of it. I have to think about it some more, but we'll talk more about it. Let's stop here. Go ahead.
I don't understand it. If the would-be king doesn't know he has it, and you said it's a helm to him, and people don't see it because it's a helm. They don't. I mean, how does it start the whole thing? I know when God picks a king, it's different. But how does it work in real life?
Listen,
when nobody knows that everything's Helem.
No, what's on? Helem does not mean that he does not think that he has the capacity to be a leader, but he doesn't have a desire to be a leader. You see, with chesed, there's an actual feeling, I want to be kind. I want to give kindness. And I have pain because I don't have someone to give it to. He did not say, la'atzme, he said, was the Yisraelis of Melucha. You don't feel a desire to be a king, but it doesn't mean he's not aware of, listen, the reason why did they choose this person? Because clearly people see in this person that potential, but even he doesn't necessarily feel the need. Like if you come to this potential king, he'll say, I don't know what you want from me. I'm very happy with my life. Do your life. What do you want? It's not someone that's itching like the Ish Chesed it's not a faculty that's active. That doesn't mean you're not aware of the listen.
He knows there's a potential. He knows he has the potential.
So, like he said, there is a
hamshacha. Thank you.
Yeah, and he said there is a hamshacha, which means a human being, like we know. Let's go back to the parentheses. The human being knows that we have the capacity, we have inner dignity that all of us have, inner self-confidence. But it's not to the extent that you feel the itch. I have to now govern over other people, or govern over a country or something. So there's definitely a sense of dignity. Like you said, there is hamshacha, but you can't link it directly. Like with chesed, there's actually, you're feeling kindness and you really feel pain. I can't. So again, I'm not talking about an ego-driven leader that's itching to be a leader because he wants power or he wants control or he just needs it for his ego. We're talking obviously someone that is like Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem said to him, go take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. What does he say? What are you talking about? Who am I? And here's God speaking to him. Now, Moshe was not a fool. Moshe was Moshe Rabbeinu. You think he didn't know that he has qualities? But he was not, if you ask Moshe, if God said to Moshe, be kind and go do chesed with others, he probably wouldn't need much encouragement because he was a kind person. But Melucha is not something that a real leader wants to be a leader. There's a very interesting Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. I once wrote it up. It's in English. It's probably on our site. Why Korach, when he came and said, Madua tisnasu, why did you guys tisnasu? The same words. It's not. Why did you take leadership for yourself? The whole nation, the whole people, the whole community are holy. Why'd you and Aaron take leadership? So all the Mefarshim talk about what was he saying? He wants to be leader. So the question is, what exactly was his mistake? So the answer is because he thought that Moshe is like him. Since he wants to be a leader, I'm sure Moshe wants to be a leader. That says the Baal Shem Tov, no. Moshe never wanted to be a leader. That's why Hashem wanted him. He wanted someone who didn't want the job. Because firstly, he knows what it entails, and it's coming from Bittul. Kairach, like all of us, we project. He said, oh, he wants to be leader. I want to be leader. And he thought Moshe was the same, has the same ego like he had. And he talks there clearly that you should never run after leadership. It says clearly you should distance yourself from anything. Real people will never run for election. You have to force them. Real ones, not the people who want it too much. That's what he talks about there. It's like kol habareich min hakoved bareich reidef achrav. The person who runs away from honor, the honor pursues him. Kol habareich achar hakoved, kol hareidef achar hakoved. Anyone who runs and pursues kavod, the kavod eludes him. Like the Rebbe says sometimes, that doesn't mean running away from honor and looking over your shoulder, whether it's running after you. We're talking about really avoiding it. So you have to keep that in mind in the context here as well.
Yeah, now I first understand the Bittul of Melucha yeah, that's great. That's great. And everybody has a little job. The guys that have a lot of it are the ones that are right from Melucha. I mean, again, everybody has every meter. It could be very, very low or very big. It depends on the person. So the guys that have a great deal of that dignity in Melucha B'Hulu are the ones that do it. I got it. I think I got it. Thank you.
Chesed and Malchus are two different definitions. Chesed is
absolutely. He's been discussing that the last paragraph. Fundamental differences. Yeah.
It's an expression of you, Chesed. Melucha has nothing to do with you. The nature of Melucha has to do with the people. They need the Melucha. I think this is the core difference.
Okay, that's a very good. It's well said. I like that. It's good. That's a good point. I think it also is in context what we said before, that Zoh is by nature a mashpia. So yes, a mashpia needs a makabel, but the focus there is on the gavra that has what to give, and melucha, the focus is on the makabel, on what needs to be done, the recipient, not on I have something to give to you. Like he said, that's why lesla megamol klum. Yeah, I think that's what you said is good. I agree. Yeah, this is very fundamental. I mean, these are topics you read and learn about, and here he's really dissecting it in a very particular way. It really makes much more sense. It's very fitting to coming to Rosh Hashanah,
Rabbi Jacobson, it says here, Masha Ein came midas melucha v'isnasus eno shayach alabanim v'gam lo ala ovanim kahagavna. But we say Avinu Malkeinu. The Klach Kasha is obviously we are both a son and an Eved to Hashem, and a prince can, or a loved one can have.
And the answer is that our relationship with God as Father and relationship with God as King are not the same relationship. With a father, we have a certain type of relationship, and Malkeinu. So Avinu Malkeinu is that they're both relationships, but not that they're the same relationship. Relationship is of us to God is on many levels. It's not just Avinu Malkeinu. We also say Ki Anu Amecha, Anu Amecha, Anu Mamirecha. We're also shepherd, sheep, and God is our shepherd. So in the relation, like we say Yonosi, Tamosi, what's the lashon there? Rayosi. Sometimes we're called God's friend. Sometimes we're called God's partner, God's twin. Sometimes husband and wife. Sometimes Melech and Am. So that's indeed correct. With Hashem, we have many relationships, and each one depending on what you're talking about. But when But generally speaking, when you see kings in history, you don't see a king over his family is not a king. It's a king over a nation that is not, that's a nefrodim. He speaks about it in Shaykh al-Amunah.
Oh, you
So
mean
so my double answer would be, number one, God is different because God has a lot of different dimensions to him and us. And number two, the fact is it's two separate things, the Avinu and the Malkeinu.
yeah, but still at the end we are bani matem. We are so if you want to say
but but the relationship of a ben is not the relation of an eved.
but we
There's
can see that we can have both aspects. Just like one of my point is, why couldn't a prince?
But is this semantics? The point is that a king is not a king over his children.
A prince.
Have you ever seen a kingdom in all of history that the king was just a king over his family?
Just his
always
family,
a king over a nation. So let's talk Begashmis. Let's talk Begashmis.
Right.
In this physical world, is it possible to be a king over family?
A family and
and
1 second. A family and if he's just his family, no. But say he's the king of France and he has a prince, his son. His son can.
But what made him king was not when he became a father. What made him king is when the nation and all the subjects, all the strangers, all accept him as king. Not when a person gives birth to children, they're not a king yet. Even if he gets, even though he's king, and you're talking. I mean, are we talking semantics here? Technical? There's a Havana here. There's an understanding here that the idea of kingship is not on family members. The fact that a family is, by the rules of France, have to follow the king's orders, that's simply a technicality. But the bottom line is, if he only had family, he wouldn't be called king.
I'm not saying only. I'm saying it says here that it's not possible to be a king over his children.
Exactly. There's a reason for that, because children is not a king relationship. It's a father and son relationship or daughter relationship.
But like Prince Charles, who now became king, when he was prince for 70 years under the queen, he couldn't relate to his mother except the fact that she's a queen and have a bittul towards her as not just as a son to a mother, but as a son to the queen.
Frankly, psychologically, I don't think anyone that's a biological child would have that bittul to a parent. No, I don't think it's possible, humanly possible. It's a parent. A parent is different, and there are many challenges in that area. You may behave like you have the bittul, technically, but a child is a child, and then a healthy parent and child, if the parent insists that the child treat them like a king, I think is not even a very healthy thing to do.
I mean, we're talking about
what a parent to a child is love, unconditional love, nurturing. The parent has to come down to the level of the child. A child should never treat a parent like a king, and the parent should never insist on that. So I'm not talking about technicality. I'm sure in public you behave that way, but we're not talking about emotionally. It's not the relationship. It's a different type of relationship.
But like I think you even said the story about.
I'm not sure what's your point. I mean a husband and wife.
Yes.
A husband and wife. The wife of a king should be treating her husband like a king, or it's her husband?
1 second. Didn't you tell the story? I think it was you that said the story that the father was.
I think what you're dealing is very much semantics and not understanding the understanding of it. This is a relationship issue. This is not whether you call the person king or not. And yes, a child may say, "My father, the king," but that's an expression. The emotional relationship is to a father. It's not to a king. Then there's a relationship to the king as a king, and that's with God is that way. On a human level, I don't see it possible. I don't even think it's appropriate. What did I say? Go ahead.
No, the story I think you told, wasn't it you that said the story about the father who has a son in his class as a teacher, and he punishes him very hard, and then he goes home and he says to his father, "Will you tell the teacher not to be so hard on him?" Meaning that a parent can have assume different roles, and a son or a child can relate to that parent in these different roles. And
to me, it sounds like you're splitting hairs and just getting into. I mean, I'm not sure what your point. Can you explain to me how that changes the pshat and what we're learning here? I'm not sure where you're driving at.
What I'm trying to drive at is that the Rebbe made a statement that you can't be a king over your
absolutely
family
you can't,
or your loved ones. And for example, I understood
it's a different relationship. If you only have children and loved ones, answer this question: can you be called king? You said no. Only when there's other strangers and you're saying, and family are also included, but only over family and loved ones. The concept of king doesn't apply there.
But he doesn't say only on. He says you can't have it in general, meaning that you could have.
Because the relationship, even though he's a king, will never be one that's like a king and subjects. It's just not the way it is.
Okay.
A healthy father should never treat his child like a servant, because that's not their role. The role is Av and Ben. I mean, Chassidus talks about this, the Ben, how we serve God as a Ben, how we serve God as an Evet. It's a very different relationship.
I was told, for example, that the Rebbe's relationship with the Frierdiker Rebbe, that he would refuse to go back into the Rebbe's office, the Frierdiker Rebbe's office, more than once a day, because he's always retained this distance from the Rebbe as Rebbe, not as a father-in-law, that he had that bittul to the Rebbe as Rebbe, not as just related to him as his shver.
I have nothing more to say, to be very honest.
Okay. I hear what you said.
Im kevonim, im kavodim. From davening and Rosh Hashanah, there are two different channels.
I understand that it's two different types of relationship to a father and as a father, and one as the king. That's all I'm saying. I don't know why it can't be those two relationships in the same person. That you can have that and realize that you have two different aspects of relationship to a parent.
It could only be in North Korea. Anywhere in the world, there's no such thing. Only in North Korea, which is a sick person.
And you keep giving examples of a Rebbe, of God. Can you tell me a human being in this earth that has a relationship with their children like a king and subjects, and it's a healthy relationship? Can you give me one example of it?
Well, I just did with the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe.
You just bring a Rebbe because he's a Rebbe. You're talking about a Rebbe now. I'm talking about a normal, we have millions, 8 billion people on this planet. They have children. Anyone that has a relationship with their children like a king to a servant, like a king and his subjects, is a problem. There's some real serious problem there.
Okay.
And the point is also not whether the person, let's say David HaMelech had children, or other people have children, they're also leaders, and the children respect them. That's a different thing. The child can respect their parent and adore them and revere them as a king. But it's not, the king is not defined by his children. That's what he's saying here. Children can't coronate their parent as king. And a king can't be turned into a king by those that are close to him. Because that's not what kingship is. That's the key point here. Whether a child can respect their parent in a very beautiful way, great. That's not the point. That's not what he's saying here. That becoming a king is not through your family and not through your loved ones. Even if they respect you after you're a king, it's through a nation that is separate from you, strangers. They're the ones that coronate, anoint, and so. Are there any other questions?
I just want to mention that Shlomo Melech had that special thing, and he was the next. And the Rebbe Rashab had that above all his brothers, and he was the next. And that's what happens. And that's why there's sometimes conflict with other people don't realize it, and that's it. It's an amazing thing. It's amazing when you think of this whole perspective. I never thought of this until now. It's great.
That may be also a key distinction, what I just said. Even if the children and the loved ones may treat the person as a king, the king will never treat them like subjects. It says, Meluchas Nasus is not Shayach Albanim. No, you don't rule your children. You don't rule and govern your loved ones. I think that's also a key point here. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Even if the children will treat their father as a king, this is not making him for a king. Kingship is a different purpose. It's a purpose of strangers, of accepting it. They could respect their father. Like Eliezer said about the Frierdiker Rebbe, I think about the Rebbe. I think that the Friedrich Rebbe also expressed himself like this. But what makes the king for king is not the acceptance of the children.
Yeah. Okay, so we finished the paragraph on page 1363. And the next paragraph is going to say, Va'adugma mikol zeh. He's going to explain now Malchus Lamaila, which I'm sure will also help us understand what we've learned till now. Very good. So we'll stop at the end of the paragraph on page 1363. Yeah, let's stop here.